Hey everybody, Shane here from VidGamiac.com. Here we are today back in Overwatch's Halloween Terror 2020 event, going for the Mystery Swap achievement. This one's going to be available to do whenever Junkenstein's challenge missions are going to be available in the arcade. This one's going to be the 5th challenge in the form of Mystery Swap. For the team's characters, I'm going to recommend everyone pick a character they aren't so good at, so one of the weaker characters should suffice: Widowmaker, Ana, Tracer, Genji, etc. Then make sure you get into the game. It's not going to matter anyways, because the gimmick of this mode is basically the characters that anyone selects are going to be randomly changed out periodically. So my best advice is to pick and start with a character that everyone isn't so good at. That way you lower your chances of getting these characters later on. So basically, try your best at the beginning to make do with these weaker characters. It shouldn't be too hard since you are just dealing with the normal zombies, and even the worst Overwatch characters should be competent enough to handle these A-OK. So the way the randomizer is going to work is every time you hit a whole minute in the countdown, you're going to switch out to a random character in the available Junkenstein characters. So that could be anyone, and you can play as the same character as a teammate, so you can roll two of the same character on the same team. So hopefully your goal is to hope that the RNG is going to be in your favor, and you do get a more playable character during some of the tougher parts. So once you get to the whole minute, everyone's going to swap over to a random character. Hopefully you have a pretty good foundation in Overwatch fundamentals that you can do pretty okay with any given character, and this one's going to pretty much come down to luck. It's going to be right here where you're going to start getting the scripted events, so watch out for the first tire that pops up at 6 minutes and 51, of course, and then you have the second one pop up at 6 minutes and 33. Hopefully you get a pretty decent character build in the random selection, so you have a good mix of ranged and close range characters that you could deal with the tires A-OK. Once we get to 6 minutes even, we're going to get our second character swap. At this point, you definitely want to make sure you hope the game gives you some decent healers. That way you could pick everyone up who's been taking too much damage. You're also going to get your first boss encounter here, so make sure you are careful on that. Hopefully you get some pretty high DPS guys as well. That way the Reaper isn't going to give you too much trouble at 5 minutes and 48. Once the Reaper comes flying in, make sure you have anyone who has a usable ultimate and dump it on him. You want to make sure you try to take him out as quickly as possible. You definitely do not want him ultimating the team, so make sure you try to be a little careful with some of the weaker characters who aren't going to be super useful with dealing with him. That'll teach you. You're going to have another character swap over at the 5-minute flat mark, so make sure you get ready for that. For this minute, you are only dealing with tires, so no boss fights, so hopefully you get some pretty good range characters, so you could spot those tires out better. So if you have some of the weaker characters who can still hit the tires from pretty far away, the better. So something like a Baptiste or an Ashe is going to be very good to roll here. You're going to have the first tire of the 3 roll in at 4 minutes and 54, the second one at 4:39, and the third one from 4:25, all from random lanes, so make sure you pay attention, and also do keep a good job of killing the zombies so you don't have them push on the door. But remember, the tires are going to be your main priority. Hopefully you also roll a healer, that way the team isn't getting overwhelmed by the zombardiers, as everyone's weak fire is probably going to be pointed at the tires. So be a little careful during this round not to get overwhelmed, but it's nothing too unmanageable, and it is very doable without any high DPS characters. Immortality field down. Next character changeover is going to come in at 4 minutes, just in time for the Junkenstein monster, so make sure you hopefully roll a good balance of DPS characters and healers. A Zenyatta is going to be very useful here, as you are able to use the Orb of Discord on the Roadhog. You can also use the healing orbs to pick up some of the weaker characters, so make sure you do that, but be very careful not to be overwhelmed by this guy, and hopefully you don't get a ton of weaker characters that the Roadhog is just going to steamroll. So make sure you try to keep your distance and make sure you try to take turns pulling him and make sure you just slowly whittle him down. Again, a Zenyatta is going to be very invaluable at this point because that Orb of Discord is going to help everyone out with the damage output. That being said, make sure someone is keeping an eye out on the clock. The tire is going to come in at 3:24, and you don't want to let that catch you off guard, especially if everyone's bunched up by the door. You don't want that exploding to take out the group. And then hopefully you should be able to finish off the Junkenstein, and then we can make it to the next minute mark. Character randomizer at 3 minutes. You are going to be dealing with a boss pretty early on in the form of the Symmetra. She isn't too difficult to deal with, even though her health bar is going to be pretty chunky. So just make sure you be a little careful with that. Hopefully you roll some decent high DPS characters, but you could definitely make it without the use of a healer right here. So be a little careful that the Symmetra doesn't do too much damage, and you should be able to get through this A-okay. You definitely want to have one of the more rangy characters pull back and hold the door. The reason for that is you are going to have a tire come in at 3 minutes and 36, so make sure you don't let that one catch you off guard. That one is always going to come in from the right side, so that one is going to be very predictable, thankfully. Once you take care of the tire, just make sure you have everyone unload and finish off the Symmetra, and then we can move on to the next minute mark.
For a moment, the will-o'-the-wisp burned brighter than her foe. The summoner flickered out of existence. The outlaw went to the grave with a snarl, unwilling to serve an eternity for her crimes.
Character changeover at the 2 minute mark. You are going to definitely want to try to get some pretty decent characters for this one, as you're going to have the 1-2 punch of the Dr. Junkenstein at 1 minute and 52, and another Reaper at 1 minute 36. So double boss fight in this moment, and if you do roll weaker characters, you are probably going to have to fight them overlapping one another. So make sure you are very careful. The area immediately ahead of the door is going to be a death spot, so make sure you be a little careful with that. It's going to be very hard to deal with both Junkenstein's grenades and the Reaper coming in, so make sure you are very careful here and try to split the team up a little, and then hopefully you should be able to take out one before the other. Make sure you use any stun abilities to try to get the Reaper off guard, especially if he gets his 4 phases in and gets his ultimate off. You definitely want to have a character with a stun ability be the one dealing with most of the Reaper, so make sure you have either McCree, Ana, or Brigitte on the team, depending on the random selection, deal with Reaper, and hopefully you should be able to stun him in case he does get his ultimate off. But the sooner you take out the Reaper, the sooner you can get back to the Junkenstein, so make sure you take out one and then slowly move on the other. Then you should get the next randomization at the 1 minute mark. Then we're going to have the double tires pop up really soon, so one on the left at 49 seconds, one on the right at 47 seconds. Then you were going to deal with the third Reaper, who shouldn't be too bad since we're just fighting him on his own. But whenever you are fighting the Reaper, do keep in mind you're going to have the tire come down the middle 8 seconds after the Reaper drops in at 25 seconds. So make sure you are careful of that. So same strategy with the Reaper. Make sure you have anyone with any stun abilities do the bulk of the work. You also want to make sure you have one of the more rangy characters hang back and try their best to thin out the zombies, but make sure you don't let that tire in the middle catch you off guard. And then once you take out the Reaper, you are just going to run the clock out.
Though she still felt his presence in the darkness.
So one last randomizer. Once the clock hits 0, hopefully you get a McCree on the team with their ultimate, so you can have them take out the bosses super quickly. If not, the next best case scenario is if everyone rolls a pretty decent DPS character, and then that way everyone can gang up on the Mercy as soon as possible. So make sure everyone dumps their ultimates into her, and then they want to take her out as quickly as possible. That way she can't heal the other two. Then it's going to be onto the Roadhog, which again, if you have a bunch of high DPS characters, you should be able to take him out relatively quickly, especially if everyone's throwing out their ultimates. Having 1 or 2 Soldier 76s at this point are going to be very useful because they can also use their healing. If not, you're going to want to hope that someone happens to roll a Zenyatta. That way the Zenyatta can not only heal people, but they can also use their Orb of Discords to weaken the more chunky bosses. So make sure you try your best to take out the Roadhog. But once the Roadhog goes down, if you have a decent supply of DPS characters, you shouldn't have any trouble dealing with the Junkenstein all by himself. Be a little careful when it comes to the door, however, as it's probably going to be taking a ton of damage if you didn't get a bunch of characters in an ideal build with characters who are going to be actively defending the door. So make sure you try to clear that before moving on the Junkenstein. And then once the coast is clear, we're just going to slowly inch our way up and then take him out.
Tactical visor activated.
So definitely make sure your DPS characters start pushing the offense towards him, and then make sure you try to take him out. And then once he goes down, that's going to be one of the harder challenges out of the way, thankfully. There's going to be our victory screen, and then immediately after, you should be good for your achievement. So there it is. This one's going to be for yet another 15 gamer score. And that's all there is to it.